All right, it is getting close to time for West Virginia to meet Penn State. So we're hearing more and more in the media, and that includes comments from Zach Seyko, Locked on Nittany Lions, or Locked on Big 12 Nittany Lions channel. He has been on several shows now, most recently talking with Mountaineer Paul, and I will link to that in the description. If I don't, then please make a comment to remind me. I have some big issues with what he has said. Obviously, I am going to go through that. Before I do, I'm going to say this is WVU Football Going Deep. I am Forrest Poston. I am not at my best today, but I am still Forrest Poston. Please bear with me. And please share, subscribe, make comments, click thumbs up, click the notification bell, and tell your friends. Now, much of what Seyko said was not really different from what other media has been saying. And the mistakes in his logic are not different from the mistakes of logic being made outside of football. Maybe that's why it bugs me so much. They're just unnecessary mistakes that teachers have been fighting for. I figure Socrates was having trouble with these, and as far as teachers, our records don't really go back even that far. But I'm going to go over them in a bit of why the claims don't match the conclusions. Let's put it that way. Because, hey, I don't know that West Virginia is going to beat Penn State. I think they have a very good chance of doing so. I've talked about that in other videos. But what Seyko gives as his reasons, there's a major logical break, a chasm between his reasons and his conclusions. Start with, he says that the core, and I think he's talking mostly about offense at that point, the core for both teams is the same. Therefore, the teams will both be the same. Therefore, since Penn State won last year, they will win this year. I hope you see how utterly absurd that line of thinking is. Yes, the core of the offense that finished last year is back. First fallacy of fact, is that the core last year is not the same as what the core was at the beginning of the season when they played Penn State. Receivers who started against Penn State, gone. They were gone after the first few games last year. Braham and Aaron turned out to be a bit of a problem. The receivers who replaced them were very young, and I'll get back into that in a little bit. C.J. Donaldson was injured the entire year last year. He's back. He's not the same. Jaheim White didn't play until the second half of the season, not any significant degree. And he may, and I agree with Mountaineer Paul on this, he may be the best running back on the field, not just for West Virginia. And he was not in the game last year. That has changed. Of course, the line is different. Will it be better? Will it be worse? Don't know. The guys have an additional year of training and experience. That makes them different. The backups, certainly different. So, and okay, yes, Garrett Green started against Penn State. He'll be the starter, barring injuries. He's not the same. He made major strides last year. Garrett Green at the end of the season was not Garrett Green against Penn State. So the idea that the teams will be the same because the core is back is just absurd. Now, I assume Penn State has gone through some similar growth. Now, he talked about the changes in Alar. So even, he said, Alar last season might have been rattled by playing an away game in Morgantown, but says he won't be this year. So he's already claiming that Penn State's not the same either. But he's also assuming that Alar has made that growth step. We have not yet gotten any evidence of that. He is assuming it based on nothing specific except experience. Quite possibly a valid assumption. Well, he says he's not convinced that the receivers will be good enough. Because, transfer receivers didn't put up huge numbers, before they came to WVU. The receivers, the young guys, didn't put up big numbers for the season last year. Well, of course, what the transfers did elsewhere is it's a factor, but, doesn't determine what these coaches will be able to do with them, for them. And the receivers last year did not play the full season, so you're not looking at full season stats. I did a video about their trajectory to show that they were getting better as the season went, which makes it reasonable to assume they will be better in the first game this season than they were in the last game last season. So, again, there's a second invalid bit of logic, and he gave no he doesn't think they'll be, ready, and he did not really give reasons. Now, he repeatedly said that the offense will be ground and pound. I wonder if he watched any games after the Penn State game. Certainly he didn't watch games from the second half of the season. West Virginia was ground and pound for 4 games, maybe 5 last year, in part because Green still needed to make some adjustments, and because Mark Hill played 2 games and wasn't ready to do a lot of passing. If you look at the second half of the season, the number of passes, the depth of passes, all much different. The offense at the end of the season was not ground and pound. And it is reasonable to think they will build on the offense they had at the end of the season and not just revert back to what they were at the beginning of last season. And actually, and a lot of people are still talking about ground and pound, and they were not that even the second half of last season, especially not with Jaheim White, Poor enunciation. And he said, Penn State will simply stack the box and force West Virginia to pass. And I hope they do. I don't think the coaches at Penn State are that foolish. I'm pretty sure they have watched all of the games. They know West Virginia can and will pass. Now, Coach Brown in his press conference today, and check out my video on that, he did mention that, okay, yeah, teams, tried to force West Virginia to beat them with the pass last year. And, well, West Virginia did. Come on. Last offensive play of the season was a game-winning touchdown pass. And that is not an accident. It was a necessity, but not an accident. It is absurd to think that West Virginia will be the same team they were against Penn State last year. Yeah, switching to the defensive side, he said, well, I don't know if the defensive backs will be ready because, all but Spells transfers. Well, Spells at corner, Burks and Wilson at safety, Jackson were here but weren't playing last year. Okay, yeah. And again, this is something we're hearing even from West Virginia media. I'm not sure. Well, of course you're not sure. Being sure is insane. We can't be sure. It is the nature of being human that you cannot be sure, because everything we think we know is processed through our senses and then goes through the brain. And we have certainly seen that a lot of people don't process things all that objectively. So, sure is not an absolute. It's a term we use when what we really mean is, yes, we are convinced more than likely the sun will rise tomorrow. It might not, but might as well say we're sure because the odds are good. Don't expect the physics to change. Now, of course, technically it doesn't rise. That's an illusion, but won't get into that. So we're not sure. That's why we have to analyze and think. I did a whole series about this. Is it more reasonable to think the defensive backs will or won't be good? You look at the quality of the defensive backs. You look at when some of them came in early enough. They were in spring ball. And you look at recent history. And you consider Drew Fabianich. We have a guy who is particularly good at spotting guys who will work out. Now, of course, I don't expect Seyko to know about Fabianich or to respect the difference he can make. But if you say you're not sure, then you should also say something about why you're not sure and what you have done to find some degree of expectation one way or the other. If not certainty or reasonable doubt, at least something. No, nothing. He doesn't know. Therefore, West Virginia can't win. And the unspoken assumption is he doesn't know, therefore they won't be ready. He is assuming that the offense will be the same, receivers won't be ready, defensive backs won't be ready. Now, some of that, I can point out specifically why it's wrong. The rest is just he's making an assumption with no basis, and then he's basing his conclusion on that unsupported assumption. Logical fallacy in a major way. And yeah, I mean, every one of he said repeatedly he doesn't see a path to victory for WVU, and every one of his assumptions is a path to victory. Because if the assumptions go in the opposite direction of what he is thinking they will, West Virginia has a very good chance of winning. But he is assuming, and then he's taking as fact that his assumptions are accurate. Yeah. Meanwhile, he also said that the defense, he said, well, yeah, okay, if West Virginia were to get turnovers, that would improve their chances, obviously. But he said the defense would have to be aggressive and ball hawking, and they won't be, because they weren't that much against Penn State last year. Well, we have a whole bunch of new defensive backs now, don't we? We have defensive backs who actually have a history of being ball hawking, who have a history of tracking the ball well, have a history of getting turnovers. We have T.J. Jackson. We have Ty French. We have a healthy Sean Martin. Pressure on the quarterback is going to be far greater, and we got pressure on Alar all game last year. We just let him out of the pocket. Linebackers are going to be far superior to what they were any time last year, much less the first game. So it is going to be an aggressive, shifting, ball hawking defense. We also brought in Victor Cabral. Hey, big change. Cabral has a specialty in teaching pass rushing, particularly for edge rushers, outside linebackers, which was a weakness. The spur bandit position has not been as consistent. Now we've got a specialist to make it consistent. We have players with significant athletic ability, including Bradley, who was coming on strong last year. Big differences that will make the defense not only more aggressive, but better at being aggressive. And he just ignores any of that. Meanwhile, I mentioned that, he thinks, okay, Alar won't be affected by the home crowd at Morgantown because of a year of experience. He also assumes, or he believes that the Penn State transfers will do well because of what he has been told so far. Well, guess what? We've been told that a number of our transfers will do well. He didn't even ask. He just assumes West Virginia transfers won't do well. Make no attempt to find out one way or the other what is happening. That is disrespect. All of his assumptions about West Virginia University football players were negative. Okay, yeah, he assumes Garrett Green will be better than last year. He did mention that. But not enough. He doesn't think Garrett Green can make a difference. All of his assumptions about Penn State coaches and players were positive. All right, I don't object to that. But if you are going to have your reasons for why you think one way or the other about your team, you need to do what you can to apply those same standards to your opponent. If you have information about your team and use that to make your judgment, you should attempt to get information about the other team before you claim to have made a judgment. Your judgment is just not valid. A fellow by the name of Neil Brown a year ago called it lazy reporting. He was right then. He's right now. Will Penn State beat West Virginia? I don't know. But there are numerous paths to victory. And all I would ask of Seyko or any other person attempting to report on West Virginia, whether you are a West Virginia specialist or from, Australia. Hey, we're known in Australia. Anywhere in the world or beyond, do your research. Do it well. I mean, it doesn't take long to ask a few questions. I'm not expecting 3 or 4 days of deep research, which is the minimum it would take to understand any program. But dang it, don't make your assumptions based on nothing, and then don't assume that your assumptions are fact. And that doesn't apply to just football. Come on, folks. Think. Yeah. Actually think. It's actually fun. Here's a little tidbit that has nothing to do directly with football. We teach Aristotle a lot in our schools. Mostly we teach the boring parts. Aristotle actually said that thinking may be the greatest pleasure, because we are built to enjoy learning. How's that for a kicker that you don't hear about? Thinking, learning, not memorization, not memorize, regurgitate, forget. Learning may be the greatest pleasure. All right. Well, I told you I wasn't at my best, and I know I have rambled more than usual. But I appreciate those who have watched at least a little while. And with fall camp underway, we will be having more press conferences, players and coaches, and I will be reporting what I can, and I will try to think about it. Meanwhile, so long.